Question 1. Performance analysis shows that a key strategic supplier has consistently met delivery timelines and quality standards, but has recently increased their prices due to rising raw material costs. The supply management team is under pressure to reduce costs. Which of the following approaches best balances cost management with the imperative of maintaining a strong, collaborative relationship with this critical supplier? Option A. Secretly solicit bids from alternative suppliers to use as leverage in negotiating a lower price with the current supplier, regardless of the impact on the existing relationship. Option B. Immediately leverage market data to demand a price rollback from the supplier, threatening to seek alternative sources if the current pricing is not met. Option C. Initiate a collaborative review with the supplier to understand the cost drivers and explore joint opportunities for efficiency improvements or alternative material sourcing that could mitigate the price increase while preserving the partnership. Option D. Inform the supplier that their price increase is unacceptable and unilaterally impose a price cap based on historical averages, without further discussion. Correct answer is C. Initiate a collaborative review with the supplier to understand the cost drivers and explore joint opportunities for efficiency improvements or alternative material sourcing that could mitigate the price increase while preserving the partnership. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in supply management, balancing the need for cost reduction with the imperative of maintaining strong, collaborative relationships with critical suppliers. The professional challenge lies in navigating the inherent tension between short-term financial gains and the long-term strategic value derived from supplier partnerships. A hasty decision based solely on immediate cost savings can damage trust, lead to reduced supplier commitment, and ultimately compromise supply chain resilience and innovation. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any supplier relationship strategy aligns with ethical principles and the overarching goals of the organization, as well as any applicable professional codes of conduct. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the supplier's performance, not just in terms of cost, but also in their contribution to innovation, reliability, and overall strategic alignment. This approach prioritizes open communication and collaborative problem solving. By engaging the supplier in discussions about performance and future needs, the organization demonstrates respect for the relationship and seeks mutually beneficial solutions. This aligns with ethical principles of fairness and transparency, and professional guidelines that emphasize building long-term value through strategic partnerships. It also supports the principles of responsible sourcing and supply chain sustainability, which are increasingly important considerations in professional supply management. An approach that focuses solely on leveraging market price comparisons to demand immediate price reductions without considering the supplier's context or the broader relationship is ethically flawed. It can be perceived as coercive and exploitative, undermining trust, and potentially violating principles of fair dealing. This approach fails to acknowledge the supplier's contributions beyond price and can lead to a breakdown in communication and cooperation. Another incorrect approach is to unilaterally impose new terms or conditions based on a perceived market advantage without prior consultation. This demonstrates a lack of respect for the existing contractual agreements and the established relationship. It can lead to disputes, legal challenges, and reputational damage, violating ethical obligations to act with integrity and uphold commitments. Finally, an approach that involves seeking alternative suppliers solely to create leverage for price negotiation, without a genuine intent to switch or a thorough evaluation of the alternative's capabilities and risks, is disingenuous. This tactic erodes trust and can be seen as manipulative, damaging the organization's reputation as a reliable business partner and violating ethical standards of honest engagement. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured evaluation of the supplier relationship's strategic importance, a thorough analysis of performance data, both cost and non-cost factors, open and honest communication with the supplier, and a consideration of the long-term implications of any proposed changes. This process should be guided by the organization's ethical code and professional standards, ensuring that decisions are fair, transparent, and contribute to sustainable value creation. Question 2. Implementation of a global sourcing strategy requires a thorough assessment of potential suppliers in various countries. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the Certified Professional in Supply Management (CPSM) framework for identifying and evaluating these suppliers, considering U.S. regulatory and ethical obligations. Option A. Focusing on suppliers located in countries with the most favorable tax incentives, irrespective of their compliance with international labor laws or U.S. trade sanctions. Option B. Prioritizing suppliers based on the lowest per unit cost, assuming all international suppliers operate under similar ethical and legal standards. Option C. Selecting suppliers based on perceived ease of doing business and informal recommendations from industry contacts, without formal verification of their compliance with U.S. import/export controls or intellectual property rights. Option D. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment that includes evaluating suppliers' adherence to U.S. trade laws, labor standards, environmental regulations, and anti-corruption statutes, alongside geopolitical and supply chain security factors. The correct answer is B. Prioritizing suppliers based on the lowest per unit cost, assuming all international suppliers operate under similar ethical and legal standards. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because identifying and evaluating potential global suppliers requires navigating diverse economic, political, and legal landscapes. A supply chain manager must balance cost-effectiveness with risk mitigation, ethical sourcing, and compliance with international trade regulations. Failure to conduct thorough due diligence can lead to significant disruptions, reputational damage, and legal repercussions. The CPSM framework emphasizes strategic thinking and risk management, making this a critical area for professional competence. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multifaceted evaluation that prioritizes compliance with U.S. trade laws and regulations, such as those enforced by the Department of Commerce and the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control (OFAC). This includes assessing supplier adherence to labor laws, environmental standards, and anti-corruption statutes like the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act (FCPA). A comprehensive risk assessment, considering geopolitical stability, intellectual property protection, and supply chain security, is paramount. This aligns with the CPSM emphasis on ethical sourcing and responsible supply chain management, ensuring long-term sustainability and minimizing legal exposure under U.S. jurisdiction. Incorrect approaches analysis. Focusing solely on the lowest per unit cost without considering regulatory compliance or ethical implications is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach ignores potential violations of U.S. trade sanctions, labor laws, or environmental regulations, which could result in severe penalties, including fines and import bans. Prioritizing suppliers based on perceived ease of doing business without verifying their adherence to U.S. import/export controls or intellectual property rights exposes the organization to risks of counterfeit goods, trade secret theft, and non-compliance with customs regulations. This can lead to legal disputes and damage to brand reputation. Selecting suppliers based on personal relationships or informal recommendations without a structured due diligence process that includes background checks and verification of compliance with U.S. laws is also a critical failure. This can inadvertently lead to engaging with entities involved in illicit activities or those that do not meet ethical sourcing standards, creating legal and reputational liabilities. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic and risk-based approach to global supplier evaluation. This involves developing clear criteria aligned with organizational strategy, ethical guidelines, and relevant U.S. regulations. A robust due diligence process should include desk research, site visits, where feasible, third-party risk assessment, and legal reviews to ensure compliance with all applicable laws and ethical standards. Continuous monitoring and performance evaluation are also essential to maintain supply chain integrity. Question 3. Which approach would be most effective in optimizing the supplier selection process for a critical component, ensuring both strategic alignment and operational efficiency, while adhering to ethical procurement standards? Option A. Implementing a comprehensive request for proposal (RFP) process with predefined, objective evaluation criteria that include technical capabilities, financial stability, and sustainability practices, followed by a negotiation strategy focused on collaborative value creation. Option B. Conducting a limited supplier survey and then proceeding directly to negotiation with the perceived best option without a formal RFP, based on anecdotal evidence of past performance. Option C. relying on established relationships and informal discussions with known suppliers to quickly identify a suitable candidate, prioritizing immediate availability over detailed evaluation. Option D, focusing the RFP evaluation exclusively on the lowest bid price, with minimal consideration for other supplier attributes, and employing aggressive negotiation tactics to secure the most favorable terms. The correct answer is A, implementing a comprehensive request for proposal (RFP) process with predefined, objective evaluation criteria that include technical capabilities, financial stability, and sustainability practices, followed by a negotiation strategy focused on collaborative value creation. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in supply management, balancing the need for a robust and objective supplier selection process with the practical constraints of time and resources. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that the chosen evaluation criteria and RFP process are comprehensive enough to identify the best supplier while remaining efficient and compliant with ethical standards and organizational policies. A rushed or biased selection process can lead to suboptimal outcomes, increased risks, and potential ethical breaches. The correct approach involves a structured and transparent RFP process that utilizes predefined, objective evaluation criteria. This method ensures that all potential suppliers are assessed on a level playing field, based on factors directly relevant to the organization's needs and strategic objectives. The negotiation strategy should then be informed by the findings of the RFP evaluation, focusing on achieving mutually beneficial terms that align with the selected supplier's strengths and the organization's requirements. This systematic approach minimizes bias, promotes fairness, and is consistent with ethical procurement practices and the principles of good supply chain management, which emphasize due diligence and value for money. An approach that relies heavily on informal discussions and personal relationships without a formal RFP process is ethically problematic. It introduces a high risk of bias, favoritism, and a lack of transparency, potentially leading to the selection of a supplier who is not the most qualified or cost-effective. This can violate principles of fair competition and may contravene organizational policies that mandate competitive bidding. Another incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the lowest price during the RFP evaluation, neglecting other critical factors such as quality, reliability, innovation, and sustainability. While cost is important, an overemphasis on price without considering these other elements can lead to hidden costs, poor performance, and ultimately, a failure to meet strategic supply management objectives. This can also be seen as a failure to conduct thorough due diligence. Finally, an approach that involves negotiating terms that are significantly unfavorable to the supplier, potentially exploiting their weaker bargaining position, is ethically questionable and can damage long-term supplier relationships. This can lead to supplier dissatisfaction, reduced commitment, and potential future supply disruption, undermining the strategic goals of supply management. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a well-defined RFP process with objective evaluation criteria, followed by a negotiation strategy that is fair, transparent, and aligned with organizational goals and ethical standards. This framework should include clear documentation, stakeholder involvement, and a commitment to continuous improvement in supplier selection and management. Question 4. The analysis reveals that a key supplier in a politically volatile region is experiencing significant currency devaluation, impacting the cost of raw materials. Simultaneously, there are increasing geopolitical tensions in that region, raising concerns about potential trade sanctions or supply chain disruptions. Which of the following strategic approaches best addresses these multifaceted risks while adhering to the principles of responsible supply chain management as outlined in the CPSM framework? Option A. Diversify the supplier base geographically, implement currency hedging strategies, and develop contingency plans for alternative sourcing and logistics. Option B. Rely solely on existing insurance policies to cover potential financial losses arising from currency fluctuations or supply disruptions. Option C. Continue sourcing from the current supplier to maintain cost advantages, assuming the risks are temporary and will resolve themselves. Option D. Immediately terminate the contract with the supplier and seek a new, lower-cost supplier in a less volatile region, without considering the transition costs and potential quality impacts. Correct answer is A. Diversify the supplier base geographically, implement currency hedging strategies, and develop contingency plans for alternative sourcing and logistics. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a supply chain manager to navigate a complex web of external factors that directly impact cost, availability, and continuity of supply. Currency fluctuations introduce financial uncertainty. Political instability can lead to sudden disruptions or changes in trade policy, and the inherent nature of global supply chains makes them susceptible to unforeseen events like natural disasters or pandemics. The CPSM professional must balance the immediate need for cost-effectiveness with the long-term strategic imperative of supply chain resilience and ethical sourcing, all within the framework of the Certified Professional in Supply Management, CPSM, Module 3, Supply Management Strategy. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves developing a multifaceted risk mitigation strategy that proactively addresses potential disruptions. This includes diversifying the supplier base geographically to reduce reliance on any single region susceptible to political instability or currency volatility. Implementing hedging strategies for currency fluctuations can stabilize costs and improve financial predictability. Furthermore, establishing robust contingency plans, such as identifying alternative transportation routes and pre-qualifying backup suppliers, is crucial for maintaining operational continuity during unforeseen events. This approach aligns with the strategic objectives of supply chain management by prioritizing resilience, cost management, and ethical considerations, as emphasized in the CPSM framework. Incorrect approach is analysis, focusing solely on the lowest initial cost without considering the inherent risks of currency fluctuations and political instability, is an ethically and professionally unsound approach. This strategy ignores the potential for significant cost overruns due to unfavorable exchange rates or the complete loss of supply due to political events, which can damage the organization's reputation and financial health. It fails to meet the strategic imperative of supply chain resilience, ignoring the potential for currency fluctuations and political instability, and proceeding with a single-source strategy based on historical cost advantages is also a flawed approach. This demonstrates a lack of foresight and a failure to adapt to evolving global risks. It exposes the organization to unacceptable levels of vulnerability and can lead to significant disruptions and financial losses, violating the principle of prudent risk management expected of a CPSM professional. Relying exclusively on insurance to cover all potential supply chain disruptions without implementing proactive mitigation strategies is an incomplete and reactive approach. While insurance can provide a financial safety net, it does not prevent disruptions from occurring, nor does it address the operational and reputational damage that can result from a prolonged supply chain breakdown. This approach neglects the fundamental responsibility of a supply chain manager to build a resilient and sustainable supply chain. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured risk management framework. This begins with identifying potential risks, currency, political disruption, assessing their likelihood and impact, and then developing mitigation strategies. The decision-making process should prioritize a balanced approach that considers cost, quality, reliability, and resilience. This involves scenario planning, developing contingency plans, and continuously monitoring the global landscape for emerging threats. The CPSM framework emphasizes strategic thinking, which includes anticipating and managing risks to ensure long-term supply chain success and ethical conduct. Question 5. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential for supply chain disruption due to increasing global scrutiny on ethical labor practices and environmental sustainability. As a supply management professional, which market research approach best aligns with the strategic imperative to mitigate these risks while ensuring competitive sourcing? Option A. Rely primarily on publicly available financial reports and news articles to gauge supplier stability and operational efficiency, without direct investigation into their ethical or environmental track records. Option B. Focus market research on suppliers located in regions with less stringent labor and environmental regulations to minimize compliance overhead and secure more favorable pricing. Option C. Conduct comprehensive market research that includes in-depth analysis of potential suppliers' labor practices, environmental certifications, and adherence to relevant industry codes of conduct, alongside cost and capability assessments. Option D. Prioritize identifying suppliers with the lowest production costs and most advanced technological capabilities, assuming ethical and environmental compliance will follow. The correct answer is D. Prioritize identifying suppliers with the lowest production costs and most advanced technological capabilities, assuming ethical and environmental compliance will follow. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the supply management professional to balance the need for competitive pricing with the ethical and regulatory imperative to ensure fair labor practices and environmental sustainability within the supply chain. The CPSM framework emphasizes strategic sourcing, which inherently involves understanding the broader implications of supplier selection beyond just cost. The challenge lies in integrating market research findings on supplier capabilities and industry trends with the organization's commitment to responsible sourcing, which is increasingly codified in ethical guidelines and potentially in specific industry regulations or corporate social responsibility (CSR) policies that, while not always strictly laws, carry significant weight in professional practice and brand reputation. The correct approach involves a comprehensive market research strategy that not only assesses supplier cost structures and production capacities, but also actively investigates their adherence to labor laws, environmental standards, and ethical business practices. This aligns with the CPSM focus on developing robust supply strategies that mitigate risks, including reputational and operational risks associated with non-compliant suppliers. By prioritizing suppliers who demonstrate a commitment to sustainability and ethical operations, the organization upholds its values and avoids potential legal entanglements or public backlash, which are critical considerations in modern supply chain management. This proactive due diligence is a cornerstone of responsible supply management, an approach that solely focuses on identifying the lowest cost suppliers without considering their labor practices or environmental impact is professionally unacceptable. This failure to conduct thorough due diligence can lead to significant reputational damage, potential legal liabilities if suppliers are found to be in violation of labor or environmental laws, and disruptions to the supply chain due to ethical controversies or regulatory sanctions against those suppliers. Such a narrow focus ignores the broader risks and responsibilities inherent in strategic supply management. Another incorrect approach is to rely exclusively on publicly available information for supplier analysis, particularly if that information is outdated or incomplete regarding ethical and environmental performance. While public data is a starting point, it is often insufficient for a deep understanding of a supplier's actual operational practices. This can lead to overlooking critical risks, such as hidden labor abuses or environmental noncompliance, which can surface later and cause significant problems. Finally, an approach that prioritizes suppliers based on their perceived technological innovation without verifying their ethical and environmental compliance is also flawed. While innovation is valuable, it should not come at the expense of fundamental ethical and legal standards. A supplier might be technologically advanced, but still engage in practices that are detrimental to the organization's reputation and long-term sustainability. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multifaceted approach to market research. This includes 1. Defining clear criteria for supplier evaluation that encompass cost, quality, delivery, ethical conduct, and environmental sustainability. 2. Utilizing a variety of research methods, including supplier questionnaires, site visits, third-party audits, and industry reports, to gather comprehensive data. 3. Engaging cross-functional teams, e.g., legal, compliance, CSR, to review findings and assess risks. 4. Establishing a risk-based approach to supplier selection, giving greater scrutiny to suppliers in high-risk industries or regions. 5. Continuously monitoring supplier performance against established criteria throughout the supplier relationship. Question 6. Strategic planning requires a thorough evaluation of supply management initiatives. When assessing the performance of a strategically sourced category, which of the following approaches provides the most comprehensive and strategically aligned measurement of results? Option A. A singular focus on achieving the maximum possible cost savings within the category, regardless of other performance indicators. Option B. A measurement system that primarily relies on supplier satisfaction survey results to gauge overall category success. Option C. A performance tracking mechanism that exclusively monitors transactional efficiency metrics like order cycle time. Option D. A balanced scorecard that integrates financial KPIs, e.g., cost savings, with non-financial KPIs, e.g., supplier performance, risk mitigation, innovation. Correct answer is D. A balanced scorecard that integrates financial KPIs, e.g., cost savings, with non-financial KPIs, e.g., supplier performance, risk mitigation, innovation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in supply management, evaluating the effectiveness of a strategic sourcing initiative. The professional is tasked with assessing category performance, which directly impacts the organization's bottom line and competitive advantage. The challenge lies in selecting the most appropriate method for measurement, ensuring it aligns with strategic objectives and provides actionable insights without being overly simplistic or overly complex. The need for a comparative analysis highlights the importance of understanding different performance measurement philosophies and their implications. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a balanced scorecard that integrates both financial and non-financial KPIs, such as supplier performance, risk mitigation, and innovation, alongside cost savings. This aligns with the principles of strategic supply management, which emphasizes a holistic view beyond mere cost reduction. The CPSM framework, particularly Module 3, stresses the importance of aligning supply management strategy with overall business objectives. Utilizing a balanced scorecard allows for a comprehensive evaluation of category performance, reflecting the multifaceted nature of strategic sourcing. This approach is ethically sound, as it promotes transparency and accountability across various performance dimensions, preventing a narrow focus that could lead to unintended negative consequences in other areas. Incorrect approach is analysis. Focusing solely on cost savings, while important, represents an incomplete picture of category performance. This narrow focus can lead to neglecting critical aspects like supplier quality, delivery reliability, or innovation, potentially jeopardizing long-term supply chain stability and competitiveness. This approach fails to meet the strategic objectives of comprehensive supply management as outlined in the CPSM curriculum. Prioritizing supplier satisfaction surveys above all other metrics is also problematic. While important for relationship management, it can be subjective and may not directly correlate with the achievement of strategic business goals. Over-reliance on this metric can lead to decisions that favor supplier comfort over optimal business outcomes, potentially masking underlying performance issues. Implementing a system that only tracks transactional efficiency metrics, such as order cycle time, without considering the strategic impact on the overall supply chain or business objectives, is another flawed approach. Transactional efficiency is a component of performance, but it does not capture the strategic value or risk associated with a category. This approach fails to provide the strategic insights necessary for effective category management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach category performance measurement by first understanding the strategic objectives for that category and the broader business. They should then identify a range of KPIs that reflect these objectives, encompassing financial, operational, risk, and innovation dimensions. A comparative analysis of different measurement approaches, as presented in the options, is crucial to select the most robust and strategically aligned method. This involves considering the potential biases and limitations of each approach, and choosing the one that offers the most comprehensive and actionable insights for continuous improvement and strategic decision-making. Question 7. Stakeholder feedback indicates a strong desire to quickly implement a new sourcing strategy for critical components, with a focus on securing immediate cost reductions and ensuring timely delivery. However, concerns have also been raised about maintaining ethical sourcing practices and fostering long-term, collaborative relationships with suppliers. Which of the following approaches best balances these competing demands during category implementation? Option A. Focus on negotiating stringent contractual terms that penalize any deviation from delivery schedules or quality standards, assuming that financial incentives will drive supplier compliance and ethical behavior. Option B. Delegate the responsibility for supplier onboarding and relationship management to individual project teams, allowing them to adapt their processes based on immediate project needs and supplier interactions. Option C. Prioritize supplier selection based on the lowest bid and shortest lead times, with a commitment to address ethical concerns and relationship development in subsequent contract reviews. Option D. Establish clear ethical sourcing guidelines and performance expectations upfront, and implement a structured onboarding process that includes collaborative goal setting and regular performance dialogues with selected suppliers. The correct answer is C. Prioritize supplier selection based on the lowest bid and shortest lead times, with a commitment to address ethical concerns and relationship development in subsequent contract reviews. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in category implementation, balancing the need for rapid execution with the imperative of robust supplier relationship management and adherence to ethical sourcing principles. The professional challenge lies in navigating competing priorities, ensuring that the drive for efficiency does not compromise the integrity of the supply base or lead to non-compliance with established ethical guidelines. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that fosters long-term supplier partnerships while meeting immediate strategic objectives. The correct approach involves a structured and collaborative process for onboarding new suppliers, emphasizing clear communication of expectations, performance metrics, and ethical standards. This aligns with the principles of responsible supply chain management, which are increasingly codified in professional standards and, in some jurisdictions, regulatory frameworks that promote fair labor practices and environmental stewardship. By proactively engaging suppliers in understanding and committing to these standards, organizations build a foundation of trust and mutual accountability, mitigating risks associated with unethical practices or performance failures. This approach also supports the strategic goal of building a resilient and value-adding supply base. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over due diligence risks overlooking critical supplier capabilities or ethical red flags. This could lead to the selection of suppliers who do not meet performance expectations or, more seriously, engage in practices that violate ethical sourcing guidelines or legal requirements related to labor, environmental impact, or data security. Such oversights can result in reputational damage, supply disruptions, and potential legal liabilities. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on contractual terms without fostering a collaborative relationship can create an adversarial dynamic. While contracts are essential, an over-reliance on punitive clauses without mechanisms for open communication and joint problem-solving can stifle innovation and hinder the development of strong, mutually beneficial partnerships. This can lead to suppliers merely meeting minimum requirements without striving for continuous improvement, ultimately undermining the strategic intent of the category implementation. Finally, an approach that neglects to integrate supplier diversity and inclusion goals into the implementation process fails to leverage the full spectrum of potential suppliers and may miss opportunities to enhance social responsibility. Ethical supply chain management often includes a commitment to supporting diverse businesses, and failing to do so represents a missed opportunity for both strategic advantage and corporate citizenship. The professional decision-making process should involve a thorough assessment of stakeholder needs, a clear definition of category objectives, and a robust supplier selection and onboarding framework that explicitly incorporates ethical considerations, performance expectations, and relationship-building strategies. This framework should be guided by the organization's overarching supply management strategy and any applicable ethical codes or regulatory mandates. Question 8. Strategic planning requires a proactive approach to supplier collaboration for continuous improvement. A supply manager identifies a supplier who consistently proposes innovative solutions that significantly enhance product quality and reduce manufacturing costs. The supply manager believes these ideas could be valuable to the organization's competitive advantage. What is the most ethically sound and strategically advantageous approach for the supply manager to pursue? Option A. Initiate a formal joint innovation program with the supplier, clearly defining intellectual property rights, revenue sharing, and mutual benefits for any jointly developed improvements. Option B. Implement the supplier's suggestions immediately to gain a competitive edge, assuming the supplier will be satisfied with the increased business volume resulting from improved product competitiveness. Option C. Secretly incorporate the supplier's innovative ideas into the organization's products and processes without informing the supplier or offering any form of compensation. Option D. Politely thank the supplier for their suggestions, but inform them that the organization has its own internal innovation team and will not be pursuing external ideas at this time. The correct answer is A. Initiate a formal joint innovation program with the supplier, clearly defining intellectual property rights, revenue sharing, and mutual benefits for any jointly developed improvements. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the pursuit of innovation and improved product quality with the ethical and regulatory obligations of fair dealing and transparency in supplier relationships. The Certified Professional in Supply Management (CPSM) framework emphasizes the importance of strategic supplier relationships that foster mutual benefit and long-term value, while adhering to ethical sourcing principles. The correct approach involves actively engaging the supplier in a collaborative innovation process, documenting all agreements, and ensuring fair compensation for their contributions. This aligns with the CPSM emphasis on strategic partnerships and ethical conduct. Specifically, the regulatory and ethical justification lies in the principle of intellectual property respect and fair value exchange. By openly discussing potential improvements and jointly developing solutions, the supply manager acts in accordance with ethical business practices that prevent the exploitation of supplier ingenuity. Documenting these collaborations ensures clarity and prevents future disputes. Upholding principles of good governance and contractual integrity. An incorrect approach that involves unilaterally incorporating the supplier's ideas without acknowledgement or compensation is ethically unsound and potentially illegal. This constitutes intellectual property theft and breaches the trust essential for long-term supplier relationships. Such actions can lead to legal challenges, reputational damage, and a breakdown in supplier confidence, directly contravening the ethical standards expected of a CPSM. Another incorrect approach, which is to dismiss the supplier's innovative ideas without proper consideration or feedback, represents a failure in strategic supply management. This approach stifles innovation, misses potential opportunities for competitive advantage, and damages the supplier relationship. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of respect for the supplier's expertise and contributions, undermining the collaborative spirit that drives supply chain excellence. A further incorrect approach, which is to implement the supplier's suggestions without understanding the full implications or potential risks, can lead to unforeseen operational issues or non-compliance with industry standards. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and strategic foresight, potentially exposing the organization to liabilities and operational disruptions, which is contrary to the responsible and strategic approach expected in supply management. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, thoroughly understanding the supplier's proposal and its potential benefits and risks. Second, engaging in open and transparent communication with the supplier to discuss collaboration, intellectual property rights, and fair compensation. Third, documenting all agreements and understandings clearly and comprehensively. Finally, ensuring that any implemented innovations align with the organization's strategic objectives and regulatory compliance requirements. This systematic process ensures ethical conduct, fosters strong supplier relationships, and maximizes the potential for mutually beneficial innovation. Question 9. Consider a scenario where a key supplier, with whom your organization has a strong, long-standing relationship and a history of excellent performance in terms of quality and on-time delivery, informs you of a necessary price increase due to rising raw material costs. Your organization's procurement department is under pressure to reduce costs. Which of the following approaches best reflects a strategic and ethical response to this situation? Aligning with best practices in supplier relationship management, SRM. Option A. Inform the supplier that the price increase is unacceptable and demand they absorb the entire cost, threatening to seek alternative suppliers if they do not comply. Option B. Immediately engage in a collaborative discussion with the supplier to understand the cost drivers, review performance data, and explore joint cost reduction initiatives or phased price adjustments, while also assessing the total cost of ownership implications of any change. Option C. Immediately initiate a search for a new supplier who can offer a lower price, without further discussion or performance review of the current supplier. Option D. Accept the price increase without question to maintain the relationship, assuming the supplier's costs are legitimate and that the long-term benefits outweigh the immediate financial impact. The correct answer is B. Immediately engage in a collaborative discussion with the supplier to understand the cost drivers, review performance data, and explore joint cost reduction initiatives or phased price adjustments, while also assessing the total cost of ownership implications of any change. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for cost reduction with the long-term strategic benefits of a strong supplier relationship. A hasty decision based solely on price could damage trust, disrupt supply continuity, and lead to higher total costs in the future. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any SRM strategy aligns with the organization's overall supply management objectives and ethical standards. The correct approach involves a comprehensive evaluation of the supplier's performance against established criteria, including quality, delivery, innovation, and responsiveness, in addition to price. This aligns with best practices in supplier relationship management, SRM, as outlined by professional supply management bodies, emphasizing a holistic view of supplier value beyond just the unit cost. Ethically, this approach promotes fairness and transparency, ensuring that decisions are based on objective performance data rather than arbitrary or short-sighted financial pressures. It also supports the principle of building long-term, mutually beneficial partnerships, which is a cornerstone of strategic supply management. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the lowest price without considering other performance metrics fails to acknowledge the total cost of ownership and the strategic importance of reliable suppliers. This can lead to ethical breaches by potentially overlooking suppliers who offer better overall value, but are not the absolute cheapest on a per-unit basis, thereby undermining fair competition and potentially leading to the selection of lower quality or less reliable suppliers. Another incorrect approach that involves immediate termination of the contract due to a slight price increase, without engaging in dialogue or exploring alternative solutions with the supplier, demonstrates a lack of commitment to partnership and can be seen as unprofessional and potentially damaging to the organization's reputation within the supply base. This approach neglects the investment made in developing the existing relationship and the potential disruption and costs associated with onboarding a new supplier. A third incorrect approach that involves pressuring the supplier to absorb the entire cost increase without understanding the supplier's own cost drivers or exploring collaborative cost reduction initiatives is also ethically questionable. It places an undue burden on the supplier and can erode trust, leading to a strained relationship and potential future supply issues. This approach fails to recognize the interconnectedness of the supply chain and the importance of supplier viability. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the strategic importance of the supplier and the criticality of the goods or services they provide. 2. Reviewing the supplier's performance data against agreed-upon key performance indicators, KPI. 3. Engaging in open and transparent communication with the supplier to understand the reasons for the price increase and explore potential solutions collaboratively. 4. Conducting a total cost of ownership analysis that considers all relevant factors beyond the unit price. 5. Evaluating alternative suppliers, but only after exhausting all reasonable options with the current supplier. 6. Making a decision that aligns with the organization's long-term supply management strategy, ethical principles, and commitment to fair business practices. Question 10. The assessment process reveals that a mid-sized manufacturing firm is evaluating its sourcing strategy for a critical component. The component is currently manufactured in-house, but a potential supplier has offered a significantly lower per-unit price. The firm's leadership is divided on whether to continue in-house production or outsource to the external supplier. Which of the following approaches best guides the firm in making this strategic sourcing decision? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive total cost of ownership (TCO) analysis that includes all direct and indirect costs associated with both in-house manufacturing and external sourcing, alongside a strategic assessment of core competencies and market risks. Option B. Maintain in-house production of the component to retain full control over quality and supply chain, regardless of potential cost savings from external suppliers. Option C. Prioritize the supplier offering the lowest per-unit purchase price to immediately reduce direct material costs and improve short-term profitability. Option D. Outsource the component production to the external supplier to focus internal resources on core manufacturing processes, assuming all non-core activities should be externalized. Correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive total cost of ownership (TCO) analysis that includes all direct and indirect costs associated with both in-house manufacturing and external sourcing, alongside a strategic assessment of core competencies and market risks. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in supply management, balancing strategic objectives with operational realities when considering sourcing decisions. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of how different sourcing strategies impact not only immediate costs, but also long-term competitive advantage, risk exposure, and organizational capabilities. A hasty decision based on incomplete analysis can lead to significant financial and strategic missteps. Careful judgment is required to align the chosen strategy with the company's overall business goals and risk appetite. The correct approach involves a comprehensive total cost of ownership (TCO) analysis that integrates both quantitative and qualitative factors, alongside a strategic assessment of core competencies and market dynamics. This approach is right because it moves beyond simple price comparisons to understand the full spectrum of costs and benefits associated with each sourcing option. Regulatory and ethical justification stems from the principle of fiduciary duty to the organization, which mandates prudent decision-making that maximizes long-term value and minimizes undue risk. A thorough TCO analysis, when conducted with integrity and transparency, aligns with ethical business practices by ensuring decisions are data-driven and serve the best interests of stakeholders. It also implicitly supports compliance by fostering a culture of due diligence and responsible resource allocation. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the lowest upfront purchase price fails to consider critical TCO elements such as supplier management, quality control, logistics, inventory holding, potential obsolescence, and the cost of managing supplier relationships or potential disruptions. This can lead to hidden costs that erode profitability and compromise quality, potentially violating ethical obligations to deliver value. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes outsourcing all non-core activities without a strategic evaluation of core competencies risks divesting capabilities that are essential for competitive differentiation or future innovation. This can lead to a loss of intellectual property, increased dependence on external parties, and a weakened competitive position, which is professionally unsound and potentially detrimental to the organization's long-term health. A third incorrect approach that rigidly adheres to an insourcing-only policy without considering the strategic benefits of outsourcing for specialized functions or economies of scale can lead to inefficiencies, higher operational costs, and a lack of agility, hindering the company's ability to adapt to market changes. This can be seen as a failure of strategic foresight and responsible resource management. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the strategic objectives and risk tolerance for the sourcing decision. This should be followed by a robust data-gathering phase to inform a comprehensive TCO analysis, incorporating both direct and indirect costs, as well as qualitative factors like supplier reliability, innovation potential, and strategic alignment. The process should involve cross-functional collaboration to ensure all perspectives are considered. Finally, the decision should be documented with a clear rationale, outlining the trade-offs and expected outcomes, and include a plan for ongoing monitoring and evaluation. Question 11. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent pattern of potential noncompliance with labor standards among a significant portion of suppliers within the electronics components category. As the category manager responsible for developing a new strategy focused on process optimization and cost reduction, which of the following actions is the most appropriate first step? Option A. Proceed with the planned process optimization and cost reduction efforts, assuming the reported issues are minor and will not significantly impact the overall strategy. Option B. Immediately initiate a competitive bidding process to replace the non-compliant suppliers with new ones offering lower prices, prioritizing cost savings. Option C. Inform the executive team of the potential issues and request immediate termination of contracts with all suppliers flagged by the monitoring system to mitigate risk. Option D. Halt all cost reduction initiatives for this category and launch a comprehensive audit of all suppliers to investigate the reported non-compliance, engaging legal and compliance teams. The correct answer is B. Immediately initiate a competitive bidding process to replace the non-compliant suppliers with new ones offering lower prices, prioritizing cost savings. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficiency and cost reduction with the imperative to maintain ethical sourcing and compliance with supply chain regulations. The CPSM framework emphasizes strategic category management, which involves defining clear objectives and aligning tactics with broader organizational goals and ethical considerations. The challenge lies in identifying the most effective approach to optimize a category strategy when faced with data indicating potential noncompliance or ethical concerns within the supply base. Careful judgment is required to ensure that cost savings do not come at the expense of regulatory adherence or corporate social responsibility. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation and remediation of identified issues before proceeding with cost reduction initiatives. This aligns with the CPSM emphasis on responsible supply chain management and adherence to ethical sourcing principles, which are often underpinned by regulatory frameworks requiring due diligence and fair labor practices. By prioritizing the resolution of potential noncompliance, the organization upholds its commitment to ethical conduct and mitigates legal and reputational risks. This proactive stance ensures that any subsequent cost optimization is built on a foundation of integrity and compliance, thereby safeguarding the long-term sustainability of the supply chain. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without addressing potential regulatory or ethical breaches is professionally unacceptable. This failure to investigate and remediate issues can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and disruption to operations if suppliers are found to be in violation of labor laws, environmental regulations, or ethical standards. Such an approach demonstrates a disregard for due diligence and a prioritization of short-term financial gains over long-term ethical and legal obligations. Another incorrect approach that involves prematurely terminating relationships with suppliers based on preliminary data without proper investigation is also professionally unsound. While addressing noncompliance is crucial, hasty decisions can disrupt supply chains, incur significant switching costs, and potentially lead to legal disputes if termination is not justified. It also fails to explore opportunities for supplier development and collaborative problem-solving, which are key components of strategic category management. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Acknowledge and validate the data from the monitoring system. 2. Initiate a thorough investigation into the identified issues, engaging relevant internal stakeholders, e.g., legal, compliance, CSR, and potentially external auditors. 3. Assess the nature and severity of any confirmed noncompliance or ethical concerns. 4. Develop a remediation plan in collaboration with the supplier, if feasible and appropriate, or identify alternative compliant suppliers. 5. Only after issues are resolved or alternative compliant sources are secured, proceed with the strategic category optimization, ensuring that cost-saving initiatives do not compromise ethical or regulatory standards. Question 12. The efficiency study reveals that a significant portion of delays in international shipments are attributable to customs clearance processes. A supply chain manager is tasked with optimizing the international logistics strategy for a new product line destined for multiple global markets. Considering the potential for varied customs regulations, documentation requirements, and tariff structures across these markets, which of the following strategies best addresses the challenges of managing international shipments and customs clearance to ensure timely and compliant delivery? Option A. Prioritize cost savings by minimizing the use of experienced customs brokers and attempting to manage clearance internally without adequate specialized expertise. Option B. Focus primarily on negotiating the lowest freight rates, assuming that customs clearance will be a secondary concern that can be addressed reactively if issues arise. Option C. Proactively engage experienced customs brokers and freight forwarders with proven expertise in the destination countries, ensuring all documentation is accurate and complete prior to shipment, and staying informed about relevant trade regulations and HS codes. Option D. Assume that standard shipping procedures are sufficient for all international destinations and rely solely on the carrier to manage all customs-related matters without independent verification. The correct answer is C. Proactively engage experienced customs brokers and freight forwarders with proven expertise in the destination countries, ensuring all documentation is accurate and complete prior to shipment, and staying informed about relevant trade regulations and HS codes. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals that a significant portion of delays in international shipments are attributable to customs clearance processes. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a supply chain manager to navigate complex, often country-specific, customs regulations, documentation requirements, and potential tariffs while balancing cost, speed, and compliance. Failure to manage these aspects effectively can lead to substantial financial penalties, reputational damage, and disruption to the supply chain. Careful judgment is required to select the most appropriate strategy for managing international logistics and customs. The correct approach involves proactively engaging with customs brokers and freight forwarders who possess in-depth knowledge of the destination country's customs laws and procedures. This includes ensuring all necessary documentation is accurate and complete prior to shipment, understanding harmonized system (HS) codes for accurate tariff classification, and being aware of any import restrictions or special requirements. This strategy is correct because it aligns with the principles of due diligence and compliance mandated by international trade regulations and customs authorities. By leveraging expert knowledge, the supply chain manager minimizes the risk of delays, penalties, and incorrect duty payments, thereby ensuring a smoother and more predictable flow of goods. This proactive stance is ethically sound, as it demonstrates a commitment to lawful trade practices. An incorrect approach would be to assume that standard shipping procedures are sufficient for all international destinations, and to rely solely on the carrier to handle all customs-related matters without independent verification. This approach is ethically and regulatorily flawed because it abdicates responsibility for compliance. Customs regulations are specific to each country, and carriers, while facilitating transport, are not typically responsible for ensuring the importer's full compliance with all destination country laws. This can lead to significant penalties for the importer, incorrect duty assessment, and potential seizure of goods, all of which stem from a failure to exercise due diligence. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize cost savings by attempting to bypass or minimize the use of experienced customs brokers, opting instead for the cheapest available service, or attempting to manage clearance internally without adequate expertise. This is professionally unacceptable as it creates a high risk of noncompliance. Customs laws are intricate and constantly evolving. Attempting to navigate them without specialized knowledge is a recipe for errors in documentation, classification, or duty calculation, leading to fines, delays, and potential legal repercussions. This approach demonstrates a lack of commitment to regulatory adherence and can be seen as a disregard for ethical business practices. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a risk-based assessment. First, identify the specific countries involved in the international shipments and research their respective customs regulations and trade agreements. Second, evaluate the complexity of the goods being shipped and their potential classification challenges. Third, assess the capabilities and reliability of potential logistics partners, including freight forwarders and customs brokers, focusing on their expertise in the relevant jurisdictions. Finally, balance the cost of compliance and expert services against the potential costs of noncompliance, including fines, delays, and lost business. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, compliant, and strategically aligned with supply chain objectives. Question 13. The control framework reveals that a supply management professional is tasked with refining the organization's supplier segmentation strategy. The primary objective is to optimize resource allocation and risk mitigation across the supplier base. Considering the strategic importance and performance of each supplier, which of the following approaches best aligns with robust supply chain strategy and responsible business practices? Option A. Classifying suppliers based on a balanced scorecard that incorporates strategic impact, risk profile, innovation potential, and performance metrics, leading to differentiated relationship management strategies. Option B. Grouping suppliers based only on their historical performance over the last fiscal year, without considering future potential or strategic alignment. Option C. Categorizing suppliers exclusively by the volume of annual spend, with larger spenders receiving more attention regardless of strategic relevance. Option D. Segmenting suppliers solely based on the lowest unit cost, prioritizing immediate cost savings above all other considerations. Correct answer is A. Classifying suppliers based on a balanced scorecard that incorporates strategic impact, risk profile, innovation potential, and performance metrics, leading to differentiated relationship management strategies. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a supply management professional to balance competing strategic objectives and resource allocation based on a nuanced understanding of supplier relationships. The core challenge lies in moving beyond transactional supplier management to a strategic approach that recognizes varying levels of importance and performance, thereby optimizing supply chain resilience and value creation. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the segmentation strategy aligns with the organization's overall business goals and risk appetite, while also adhering to ethical sourcing principles and relevant supply chain regulations. The correct approach involves a systematic classification of suppliers based on their strategic impact and performance metrics, such as innovation contribution, supply continuity risk, and cost effectiveness. This segmentation allows for tailored relationship management strategies, resource allocation, and risk mitigation efforts. For instance, strategically critical suppliers, even if currently underperforming, might warrant investment in joint development or performance improvement programs, aligning with the principle of fostering long-term, mutually beneficial partnerships. This approach is ethically sound as it promotes fairness and transparency in supplier dealings, and it aligns with best practices in supply chain management that emphasize proactive risk management and value maximization, which are implicitly supported by regulatory frameworks promoting responsible business conduct. An incorrect approach would be to segment suppliers solely based on the lowest price. This fails to acknowledge the strategic importance of suppliers who may offer unique value, innovation, or critical components, even at a higher price point. Ethically, this can lead to exploitative relationships and a disregard for supplier sustainability, potentially violating principles of fair dealing and responsible sourcing. Another incorrect approach is to segment suppliers based only on past performance without considering future potential or strategic alignment. This can lead to prematurely discarding valuable partners who may have temporary performance dips but possess significant future strategic value, thus hindering long-term supply chain development and innovation. Finally, segmenting suppliers based on the volume of business alone overlooks the strategic criticality of smaller suppliers who might hold unique intellectual property or control niche markets, leading to an unbalanced and potentially fragile supply base. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with defining clear segmentation criteria aligned with organizational strategy. This involves cross-functional input to assess supplier impact across various dimensions: strategic importance, risk, performance, innovation. Subsequently, data should be gathered and analyzed to objectively classify suppliers. The framework then dictates developing differentiated management strategies for each segment, focusing on building robust relationships with strategic partners, managing risks with critical suppliers, and optimizing transactional relationships with others. Regular review and recalibration of the segmentation are crucial to adapt to evolving business needs and market dynamics. Question 14. Market research demonstrates a growing demand for the company's products in emerging economies, prompting a strategic review of its global supply chain network. The company, headquartered in the United States, is considering establishing new manufacturing and distribution facilities. Which of the following approaches best aligns with a robust and compliant network design strategy? Option A. Select locations based primarily on the proximity to key raw material suppliers, assuming that efficient inbound logistics will inherently lead to a successful distribution network. Option B. Prioritize locations offering the lowest labor costs and minimal regulatory oversight to maximize immediate cost savings and operational flexibility. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of potential locations, evaluating factors such as market access, transportation infrastructure, political stability, labor availability and skill sets, environmental regulations, and local legal frameworks, while ensuring compliance with U.S. trade laws and international ethical standards. Option D. Focus on establishing facilities in countries with the most favorable tax treaties with the United States, irrespective of logistical challenges or market proximity. Correct answer is B. Prioritize locations offering the lowest labor costs and minimal regulatory oversight to maximize immediate cost savings and operational flexibility. Explanation. This scenario presents a common yet complex challenge in supply chain strategy, optimizing network design for a global organization. The professional challenge lies in balancing competing objectives such as cost reduction, service level improvement, risk mitigation, and compliance with diverse international regulations, all while ensuring alignment with the company's overall strategic goals. Making the wrong decision can lead to significant financial losses, operational inefficiencies, and reputational damage. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, data-driven analysis that considers all relevant factors, including market demand, transportation costs, labor availability, infrastructure, and regulatory environments across potential locations. This approach prioritizes a holistic view, ensuring that the chosen network design not only meets immediate operational needs, but also supports long-term strategic objectives and adheres to all applicable laws and ethical standards. Specifically, for a U.S.-based company operating internationally, this would involve adhering to U.S. trade laws, environmental regulations, labor laws, and any international agreements or treaties the U.S. is party to, while also respecting the laws of host countries. The ethical imperative is to operate responsibly and sustainably in all locations. An incorrect approach that solely focuses on minimizing labor costs without considering the associated risks, such as political instability, inadequate infrastructure, or potential for exploitation, fails to meet professional standards. Such a decision could lead to supply chain disruptions, ethical breaches related to labor practices, and non-compliance with international human rights standards, which can have severe legal and reputational consequences. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes proximity to raw materials without adequately assessing market access or distribution efficiency overlooks critical aspects of network viability. This can result in high inventory holding costs, extended lead times, and an inability to effectively serve end customers, ultimately undermining the strategic purpose of the network. A third incorrect approach that selects locations based on tax incentives alone, without a thorough evaluation of operational feasibility, regulatory compliance, and long-term sustainability, is also professionally unsound. While tax advantages are a consideration, they should not be the sole or primary driver. Over-reliance on such incentives can lead to a network that is not robust, is difficult to manage, and may face future regulatory scrutiny or changes in tax policy, leading to unforeseen costs and operational challenges. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with clearly defining strategic objectives and key performance indicators. This should be followed by rigorous data collection and analysis, including scenario planning and risk assessment. Stakeholder engagement, encompassing internal departments and potentially external experts, is crucial. Finally, the decision should be based on a balanced evaluation of all factors, with a clear justification that aligns with ethical principles and regulatory compliance. Question 15. Benchmark analysis indicates that the procurement department is facing pressure from the finance department to achieve immediate cost reductions and from the engineering department to maintain existing supplier relationships due to perceived product quality and reliability. Considering the Certified Professional in Supply Management, CPSM Module 3, Supply Management Strategy Framework, which approach best balances these competing stakeholder demands while adhering to strategic sourcing principles. Option A. Prioritize the finance department's cost reduction targets by negotiating deeper discounts with existing suppliers without extensive market research or formal competitive bidding. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive strategic sourcing process that includes thorough market analysis, total cost of ownership evaluation, supplier risk assessment, and a formal request for proposal (RFP) to identify the best value proposition, even if it means challenging existing supplier relationships. Option C. Implement a dual sourcing strategy where a portion of the spend is allocated to new, lower-cost suppliers identified through informal channels, while the remainder stays with incumbent suppliers to appease both departments. Option D. Agree to the engineering department's request to maintain current supplier relationships, focusing solely on ensuring their continued satisfaction and overlooking potential cost savings or alternative supplier capabilities. Correct answer is B. Initiate a comprehensive strategic sourcing process that includes thorough market analysis, total cost of ownership evaluation, supplier risk assessment, and a formal request for proposal (RFP) to identify the best value proposition, even if it means challenging existing supplier relationships. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in strategic sourcing, where competing stakeholder interests can impede the development and implementation of an optimal supply management strategy. The professional challenge lies in balancing the immediate, often tactical, needs of individual departments with the long-term, strategic objectives of the organization. Effective supply management requires a holistic view that considers total cost of ownership, risk mitigation, and supplier relationship management, which may not align with a single department's immediate budget or operational preferences. Careful judgment is required to ensure that decisions are driven by strategic alignment and organizational benefit rather than siloed departmental priorities. The correct approach involves a comprehensive stakeholder engagement process that prioritizes data-driven insights and alignment with the organization's overall strategic sourcing objectives. This includes conducting thorough market research, analyzing total cost of ownership, assessing supplier capabilities and risks, and developing a sourcing strategy that balances cost, quality, service, and innovation. Regulatory and ethical considerations, such as fair competition, transparency in the bidding process, and adherence to contractual obligations, are paramount. The CPSM framework emphasizes a strategic, integrated approach to supply management, which necessitates understanding and addressing the needs of all relevant stakeholders, while upholding ethical standards and compliance with applicable laws and regulations. An incorrect approach would be to solely prioritize the immediate cost-saving demands of the finance department, without considering the potential impact on operational efficiency, product quality, or long-term supplier relationships. This could lead to selecting suppliers based on the lowest upfront price, potentially resulting in higher total costs due to poor quality, unreliable delivery, or increased maintenance. Ethically, this approach can be problematic if it leads to the exclusion of qualified suppliers who may not be able to meet the lowest price point, but offer superior value or innovation. Another incorrect approach would be to concede to the operational preferences of the engineering department, without a rigorous evaluation of alternative suppliers or sourcing strategies. While engineering expertise is valuable, their focus might be on specific technical features that may not be cost-effective or strategically aligned with the broader sourcing goals. This can lead to suboptimal sourcing decisions that inflate costs or limit competitive opportunities, potentially violating principles of fair and open competition. A third incorrect approach involves bypassing established sourcing processes and directly awarding business to a preferred supplier based on historical relationships or perceived convenience. This not only undermines the integrity of the strategic sourcing process, but also creates significant ethical and regulatory risks, including potential conflicts of interest, lack of transparency, and non-compliance with procurement policies and regulations designed to ensure fairness and value for the organization. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the strategic sourcing objectives and key performance indicators, KPI. Second, identify and engage all relevant stakeholders to understand their needs, concerns, and perspectives. Third, conduct thorough market analysis, including total cost of ownership modeling and risk assessment. Fourth, develop and evaluate multiple sourcing strategies, considering various supplier options and contract structures. Fifth, present a data-backed recommendation to decision-makers, clearly articulating the rationale, potential benefits, risks, and alignment with organizational strategy. Finally, ensure all sourcing activities are conducted ethically, transparently, and in compliance with all applicable regulations and internal policies. Question 16. Compliance review shows that a company's sales and operations planning (S&OP) process is primarily driven by the sales team's projections, with limited formal input from operations, finance, or procurement. This leads to frequent stockouts and an inability to meet production schedules. Which of the following approaches best aligns with best practices for S&OP and professional supply chain management? Option A. Rely on historical sales data alone for demand forecasting, without any process for incorporating market intelligence or forward-looking insights. Option B. Implement a formal cross-functional S&OP committee with defined roles for demand planning, supply planning, financial review, and executive decision-making, meeting regularly to reconcile plans and address deviations. Option C. Focus S&OP efforts exclusively on optimizing inventory levels for existing products, without considering new product introductions or market expansion strategies. Option D. Empower the sales department to finalize demand forecasts, with operations tasked solely with fulfilling the orders as generated. The correct answer is B. Implement a formal, cross-functional S&OP committee with defined roles for demand planning, supply planning, financial review, and executive decision-making, meeting regularly to reconcile plans and address deviations. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in supply chain management, ensuring that the sales and operations planning S&OP process effectively bridges the gap between strategic objectives and tactical execution, thereby aligning supply and demand. The professional challenge lies in identifying the most robust and compliant approach to S&OP that not only optimizes operational efficiency, but also adheres to ethical business practices and relevant industry guidelines, particularly within the context of the Certified Professional in Supply Management (CPSM) framework. The CPSM emphasizes strategic alignment and ethical conduct, requiring professionals to demonstrate a thorough understanding of how S&OP contributes to overall business success while upholding integrity. The correct approach involves establishing a cross-functional S&OP committee with clear mandates and defined responsibilities for demand forecasting, supply planning, and financial reconciliation. This committee should meet regularly to review integrated plans, identify deviations, and make informed decisions that balance customer service, inventory levels, and profitability. This aligns with CPSM best practices by promoting collaboration, data-driven decision-making, and a holistic view of the supply chain. Ethically, this approach fosters transparency and accountability across departments, ensuring that decisions are made in the best interest of the organization and its stakeholders, avoiding siloed thinking that could lead to suboptimal outcomes or misrepresentation of capabilities. An incorrect approach would be to delegate S&OP solely to the sales department without adequate input from operations, finance, or procurement. This failure to integrate perspectives can lead to unrealistic demand forecasts that operations cannot fulfill, resulting in stockouts, expedited shipping costs, and damaged customer relationships. Ethically, this approach is problematic as it prioritizes short-term sales targets over sustainable operational capacity and financial prudence, potentially misleading other departments about achievable outcomes. Another incorrect approach is to treat S&OP as a purely tactical exercise, focused only on short-term inventory adjustments, without considering long-term strategic goals or market dynamics. This overlooks the strategic imperative of S&OP to align operational plans with the company's overall business strategy, such as market expansion or new product introductions. This can lead to misallocation of resources and missed strategic opportunities. From an ethical standpoint, this approach fails to uphold the professional responsibility of supply chain managers to contribute to the long-term health and strategic direction of the organization. A third incorrect approach is to rely on outdated or inaccurate data for planning, without a robust process for data validation and cleansing. This can lead to flawed forecasts and supply plans, resulting in significant operational inefficiencies and financial losses. Ethically, using unreliable data for critical business planning is a failure of due diligence and can lead to decisions that negatively impact the company and its employees. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough assessment of the current S&OP process against established best practices and ethical guidelines. This includes evaluating the level of cross-functional collaboration, the quality of data used, the clarity of roles and responsibilities, and the alignment of S&OP outcomes with strategic objectives. Professionals should advocate for processes that promote transparency, accountability, and data integrity, ensuring that S&OP serves as a strategic lever for business success rather than a mere operational chore. Question 17. The risk matrix shows a high probability of supply disruption for a critical component due to geopolitical instability in its primary sourcing region. To mitigate this, the supply chain strategy team is considering several design options. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory frameworks promoting fair competition and preventing monopolistic practices, while also ensuring supply chain resilience? Option A. Consolidate sourcing of the critical component with a single, highly reliable domestic supplier who can meet all volume requirements and offers significant cost savings. Option B. Invest in vertical integration by acquiring a key supplier of the critical component to gain complete control over its production and supply. Option C. Develop a dual sourcing strategy, engaging two geographically diverse, reputable suppliers for the critical component, even if it requires a slightly higher unit cost and more complex inventory management. Option D. Negotiate an exclusive long-term contract with the largest existing supplier in the unstable region, securing preferential pricing and guaranteed supply. The correct answer is A. Consolidate sourcing of the critical component with a single, highly reliable domestic supplier who can meet all volume requirements and offers significant cost savings. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the strategic imperative of supply chain resilience with the regulatory obligations of ensuring fair competition and avoiding monopolistic practices. Supply chain design decision directly impacts market dynamics and supplier relationships, necessitating a thorough understanding of relevant regulations to prevent unintended legal or ethical breaches. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen design not only mitigates risks, but also adheres to the principles of a free and open market. The correct approach involves diversifying the supplier base for critical components, even if it means a slightly higher initial cost or a more complex integration process. This strategy aligns with regulatory frameworks that promote fair competition and prevent undue concentration of market power. By avoiding reliance on a single supplier, the organization upholds principles of antitrust law, which aim to prevent monopolies and ensure that smaller suppliers have opportunities to compete. This proactive stance also demonstrates a commitment to ethical sourcing and responsible supply chain management, fostering long-term stability and reducing the risk of supply disruptions due to a single point of failure, which can indirectly impact market availability and consumer choice. An incorrect approach would be to consolidate all critical component sourcing with a single dominant supplier, even if that supplier offers the lowest price or the most integrated solution. This strategy poses significant regulatory risks, as it could be interpreted as an attempt to create or reinforce a monopolistic position, potentially violating antitrust laws. Such consolidation can stifle innovation among other potential suppliers and limit market access for new entrants, leading to regulatory scrutiny and potential penalties. Ethically, it raises concerns about fairness and the equitable distribution of business opportunities. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize speed of implementation over thorough regulatory due diligence when selecting suppliers for new supply chain design. This can lead to the inadvertent selection of suppliers who do not meet compliance standards or who operate in ways that could create future legal liabilities. Rushing the process without verifying supplier adherence to ethical labor practices, environmental regulations, or data privacy laws can result in reputational damage and legal challenges, undermining the long-term success of the supply chain design. A third incorrect approach is to design the supply chain with a sole focus on cost reduction, without considering the potential for creating dependencies that could be exploited. While cost efficiency is a key objective, a design that inadvertently creates a bottleneck or a situation where a single supplier holds excessive leverage can lead to price gouging or unfavorable contract terms in the future. This can indirectly lead to market distortions and may attract regulatory attention if it impacts the broader industry or consumer prices. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multifaceted risk assessment that explicitly incorporates regulatory compliance and ethical considerations alongside operational and financial factors. This includes conducting thorough due diligence on potential suppliers, understanding the competitive landscape, and evaluating the long-term implications of supply chain design choices on market dynamics. Engaging legal counsel and compliance officers early in the design process is crucial to identify and mitigate potential regulatory pitfalls. A balanced approach that prioritizes resilience, ethical conduct, and fair competition, even if it involves slightly higher upfront investment, ultimately leads to a more sustainable and legally sound supply chain. Question 18. Strategic planning requires a clear understanding of organizational spend to develop effective supply management strategies. A supply management team is tasked with segmenting the company's total spend into manageable categories to guide sourcing efforts. Considering the principles of strategic supply management, which of the following segmentation approaches would best support the development of tailored sourcing strategies and optimize value realization? Option A. Segmenting spend only by the total number of unique suppliers associated with each spend item. Option B. Segmenting spend based on a combination of spend volume, criticality of the item or service to the business, supplier market complexity, and potential for innovation or risk. Option C. Segmenting spend solely by the alphabetical order of the commodity names as they appear in the procurement system. Option D. Segmenting spend exclusively by the department that initiates the purchase request. The correct answer is B. Segmenting spend based on a combination of spend volume, criticality of the item or service to the business, supplier market complexity, and potential for innovation or risk. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in supply management. Effectively segmenting spend to optimize strategic sourcing efforts. Professional challenge lies in balancing the desire for comprehensive analysis with the practical limitations of resources and the need for actionable insights. A flawed segmentation can lead to misallocated resources, missed opportunities for cost savings or risk mitigation, and ultimately, a less effective supply management strategy. Careful judgment is required to ensure the segmentation aligns with organizational goals and the realities of the supply market. The correct approach involves segmenting spend based on a combination of factors that reflect the strategic importance and complexity of the supply market, such as spend volume, criticality of the item or service, supplier market structure, and potential for innovation or risk. This allows for the development of tailored sourcing strategies for each category, maximizing value and minimizing risk. For instance, high spend, critical items with few suppliers would warrant a more intensive, strategic approach, while low spend, non-critical items might be managed through more standardized, transactional processes. This aligns with ethical supply management principles of responsible resource allocation and value creation for the organization. An approach that segments spend solely based on alphabetical order of commodity names is professionally unacceptable. This method ignores all critical business and market factors, leading to an arbitrary and ineffective segmentation. It fails to identify strategic opportunities or risks, potentially treating a mission-critical, high-spend category with the same rigor as a minor, easily sourced item. This represents a failure in professional due diligence and strategic thinking, potentially leading to significant financial and operational detriment. Another incorrect approach is to segment spend only by department requesting the purchase. While departmental needs are important, this segmentation overlooks the consolidated spend and market dynamics across the entire organization. For example, multiple departments might be purchasing similar goods or services from different suppliers, leading to higher overall costs and missed opportunities for volume discounts or strategic supplier partnerships. This approach lacks a holistic view of organizational spend and market leverage, failing to optimize supply management strategy. Finally, segmenting spend exclusively by the number of suppliers for each item is also flawed. While supplier count is a factor, it should not be the sole determinant. A category with many suppliers might still be strategically important due to its criticality or potential for innovation, or conversely, a category with few suppliers might be low spend and non-critical, not warranting intensive strategic focus. This approach oversimplifies the complexity of supplier relationships and market dynamics, leading to an inefficient allocation of resources and potentially overlooking critical risks or opportunities. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, understand the organization's strategic objectives. Second, gather comprehensive spend data. Third, identify key segmentation criteria that reflect market dynamics, item criticality, and organizational impact. Fourth, develop a segmentation model that is both robust and practical to implement. Finally, regularly review and refine the segmentation as business needs and market conditions evolve. Question 19. Benchmark analysis indicates that a key supplier, critical to the uninterrupted flow of essential components, is experiencing increased raw material costs and labor shortages, impacting their ability to meet agreed-upon delivery schedules and potentially leading to price increases. The supply management professional must decide how to respond to maintain a stable and cost-effective supply chain. Which of the following approaches best reflects a strategic and relationship-focused response aligned with best practices in supply management strategy? Option A. Immediately begin sourcing alternative suppliers to replace the underperforming key supplier, prioritizing the lowest bid regardless of the supplier's experience or integration with the existing supply chain. Option B. Initiate immediate negotiations to leverage market conditions and secure the lowest possible price for future orders, even if it strains the supplier's financial capacity. Option C. Request detailed financial statements and operational plans from the supplier to assess their financial health, and then dictate a revised pricing structure based on this information. Option D. Proactively engage the supplier in a collaborative discussion to understand the root causes of their challenges and jointly explore solutions, such as volume adjustments, shared forecasting, or process improvements, to ensure long-term viability and continued supply. The correct answer is B. Initiate immediate negotiations to leverage market conditions and secure the lowest possible price for future orders, even if it strains the supplier's financial capacity. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in supply management, balancing the need for competitive pricing with the strategic imperative of fostering long-term, collaborative relationships with critical suppliers. The professional challenge lies in discerning when a supplier's performance warrants a shift from a purely transactional, cost-driven approach to a more integrated, relationship-focused strategy, especially when market pressures might tempt a short-sighted decision. Careful judgment is required to avoid alienating valuable partners who contribute to supply chain resilience and innovation. The correct approach involves proactively engaging the supplier to understand their challenges and collaboratively developing solutions that address both their operational needs and the buyer's strategic objectives. This demonstrates a commitment to mutual benefit and long-term partnership, which is a cornerstone of effective supply management strategy. This approach aligns with ethical principles of fairness and transparency and implicitly supports the principles of good business practice that underpin regulatory frameworks focused on fair dealing and preventing anti-competitive behavior, even if not explicitly codified in specific supply chain regulations for this exam. Building trust and shared understanding reduces risk and fosters a more robust supply chain. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on leveraging market power to extract immediate cost concessions without considering the supplier's viability or the long-term impact on the relationship is professionally unacceptable. This can lead to supplier insolvency, reduced quality, or a breakdown in communication, ultimately harming the buyer's supply chain. Such an approach can also be perceived as unethical, as it disregards the supplier's contribution and can create an environment of distrust. Another incorrect approach, which is to disengage from the supplier and seek immediate replacement based on a single performance metric, fails to acknowledge the complexity of supplier relationships and the potential for improvement through collaborative problem solving. This reactive stance can lead to higher switching costs, disruption, and a loss of institutional knowledge. It also misses opportunities to develop a supplier into a more strategic partner. Finally, an approach that involves sharing sensitive operational data with the supplier without a clear, mutually beneficial agreement or a robust confidentiality framework risks compromising proprietary information and can create an imbalance of power. While collaboration is key, it must be managed with appropriate safeguards to protect both parties' interests and maintain a professional, ethical engagement. Question 20. The assessment process reveals that a critical component for a new product line is sourced from a country experiencing increasing political unrest and significant currency devaluation. The current supplier is the sole provider of this specialized component, and the lead time is substantial. What is the most strategically sound approach to mitigate these identified risks? Option A. Renegotiate terms with the current supplier to include price adjustments based on currency fluctuations and request a slight increase in their production capacity. Option B. Immediately initiate a search for alternative suppliers in politically stable regions, explore currency hedging strategies, and develop a robust inventory buffer for the critical component. Option C. Diversify the sourcing of the critical component by adding a second supplier in the same politically unstable country to increase overall supply volume. Option D. Continue with the current supplier, assuming the political situation will stabilize and the currency will recover, while monitoring the situation passively. Correct answer is B. Immediately initiate a search for alternative suppliers in politically stable regions, explore currency hedging strategies, and develop a robust inventory buffer for the critical component. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a complex scenario where a global supply chain is exposed to significant risks stemming from currency fluctuations, political instability in a key sourcing region, and potential disruptions due to unforeseen events. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires a proactive and strategic approach to risk mitigation that balances cost-effectiveness with supply continuity and compliance. The CPSM framework emphasizes the importance of identifying, assessing, and responding to supply chain risks to ensure organizational resilience and achieve strategic objectives. The correct approach involves developing a multifaceted risk mitigation strategy that includes diversifying the supplier base across different geopolitical regions to reduce reliance on any single unstable area, hedging against currency volatility through financial instruments or contractual clauses, and establishing contingency plans for potential disruptions. This aligns with the ethical and professional standards expected of a certified professional in supply management, which mandate due diligence in managing supply chain risks to protect the organization's interests and stakeholders. Specifically, the CPSM Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct encourages foresight and proactive risk management to ensure the integrity and reliability of supply chains. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the identified risks due to perceived short-term cost savings or a lack of immediate impact. This failure to address currency fluctuations could lead to significant financial losses when payments are made in a volatile foreign currency. Ignoring political instability in a sourcing region exposes the organization to potential supply interruptions, reputational damage, and even legal complications if operations in that region become untenable or subject to sanctions. Relying solely on a single supplier, even if currently cost-effective, creates a critical vulnerability that can be exploited by unforeseen events, leading to stockouts and production halts. These approaches demonstrate a lack of strategic foresight and a failure to uphold the professional responsibility to safeguard the supply chain's integrity and the organization's operational continuity. Professionals should employ a structured risk management process, beginning with thorough risk identification and assessment. This should be followed by the development and implementation of appropriate mitigation strategies, considering both financial and operational impacts. Regular monitoring and review of the risk landscape and the effectiveness of mitigation measures are crucial for adapting to changing circumstances and ensuring ongoing supply chain resilience.